Hi everyone, how you doing today? Oh, the 1st of February today. Did you say pinch, punch, it's the 1st of the month? Or did you say white rabbits? Because that's good luck really, isn't it? Anyway, so the 1st of February. Ooh. So today's story is called The Wizard's Needle. So if you're sitting nice and comfortably, then I'll begin. There once was a wizard called So-So, who had a wonderful needle. He had only to speak to it and it would start sewing anything he wanted. That is wonderful, isn't it? If he said, "Needle, make me a bag," it would make one. If he said, "Needle, make me a coat," it would at once set to work and make him one out of any old rag. Now one day Curly-Toes the pixie wanted some sacks for his potatoes. He couldn't afford to buy any, so he thought he would make them out of some old pieces of carpet that he'd got. But when he'd finished making one sack, he was very tired. Indeed, for he hated sewing. If only I could borrow So-So's needle, he thought, how fine that would be. I should only say, "Needle, make me a sack," and it would make me one at once. All I should have to do is sit and watch it. He made up his mind to go to Wizard So-So and ask him for the loan of the magic needle. So he put on his hat and he set out. He banged at So-So's door and the wizard opened it. "Will you lend me your magic needle?" asked Curly-Toes. "Certainly not," said So-So. "I never lend it to anyone. It's far too valuable." He slammed the door and left Curly-Toes on the step, frowning hard. The pixie was setting off home again when he happened to catch sight of the needle on a table just inside So-So's kitchen window. "Oh," he thought, "there's the needle itself. What's to prevent me from taking it and using it without the wizard knowing? I can easily put it back again when I've finished with it, and he won't be any the wiser." With that, the naughty pixie slipped his hand through the open window, picked up the needle and ran off. And it wasn't long before he was home again. He took all the pieces of old carpet and laid them in a row on the floor. Then he put the magic needle in the middle of them. "Needle, make me some sacks," he said. At once the little needle got busy. It jumped to a piece of carpet, and in a trice it had sewn one piece into a fine sack. There was a long thread always sticking out of the needle, and it used this to sew the sack together. It was really wonderful to watch. Curly-Toes enjoyed it all thoroughly. It was fine to sit down at a table and see the needle doing all his hard work. He would have plenty of strong sacks for his potatoes. In 5 minutes the needle had used up all the pieces of carpet and had made 6 good sacks. Curly-Toes waited for it to put itself quietly down beside them, and then he meant to pick it up again and take it back to So-So's house. But the needle didn't stop sewing. To Curly-Toes' great surprise, it whipped up the lovely new rug on the floor and began to make a sack out of that too. "Hey," said Curly-Toes angrily, "stop, needle. That's my new rug. Don't spoil it. I don't want any more sacks now." The needle took no notice at all. It just went on sewing the rug into a sack. Curly-Toes rushed up to it and tried to stop it. It pricked him hard on the finger and he howled with pain. "Oh, you horrid needle," he wept. "Why don't you stop when you're told? Stop, I tell you. Stop!" The needle took no notice. It finished making a sack of the rug and then whipped down one of the Curly-Toes' pretty red curtains and began to make a sack out of that too. The pixie couldn't bear it. He had made the curtains himself and he wasn't going to have them all spoiled. He took a pair of pincers and went softly up to the needle. He suddenly pounced on it and caught it in the pincers, but it wasn't any good at all. The needle slipped out quite easily and gave Pixie such a jab in the arm that he danced around the room in pain. The needle took down the other curtain and made a sack of that too, and then it hopped onto the table, and Curly-Toes gave a cry of rage. It was going to make his lovely blue tablecloth into a sack as well. You shan't," he cried. "And I had it for my birthday, and you can't spoil it." He climbed onto the table and sat himself firmly down in the middle of the cloth to stop the needle from making it into a sack, but it wasn't a bit of good. In a trice the cloth was being sewn into a sack, and oh dear me, what was happening? Curly-Toes found himself sewn tightly into the sack too. The needle pulled the neck of the sack tight and sewed it carefully all the way round, and then it flew out of the window. Poor Curly-Toes sat in the middle of the table, sewn tightly into a sack made of his blue tablecloth. He struggled and wiggled, shouted and cried, but he couldn't get out of that sack. Soon his friends heard his cries, and they came running to his aid. How they laughed to see the pixie in such a fix. They got some scissors and tried to cut the stitches open around the neck of the sack, but they couldn't. The thread was magic, and try as they would, they couldn't cut it or break it. Well, Curly-Toes, this is a fine thing, he said to his friends. We can't set you free. You'll have to go to Wizard So-So's and ask him to help you. Come along, we'll go with you. So poor Curly-Toes was helped off the table, and then he hopped slowly out of his front door, for it was impossible to walk in the sack. He could do nothing but jump. He kept tumbling over, and really it was the funniest sight, though the pixie didn't think so. At last he arrived at the wizard's house, and So-So opened the door. How he laughed to see the pixie in a tablecloth sack. Yes, I know what you've done, he said. I saw you take my needle, and I knew it would punish you, so I didn't say anything. How are you going to get out of that sack? Oh, do please help me, begged the pixie. Certainly not, said the wizard. You got yourself into this fix. You must get out of it yourself too. Oh, do help him, So-So, begged all Curly-Toes' friends. He's very, very sorry. Well, if I get you out of the sack, will you come and weed my garden every day for a week? The wizard asked Curly-Toes. Now the pixie hated weeding, but he couldn't do anything else but agree. So he said he would. Then So-So fetched a pair of magic scissors, and snip, snip, the stitches were all cut and Curly-Toes was free. Off he went home and spent the rest of the day trying to undo the stitches on his rug and curtains. He went to bed a very sad pixie. Then every day for a week he set off to weed the wizard's garden, and by the end of that time he had learnt his lesson. I'll never again borrow anything without asking, he vowed, and as far as I know, he never did. Wow. Just goes to show you need to ask before you borrow something, and if somebody says no, that's it. But if you ask really nicely, most of the time people will say yes. So that was called The Wizard's Needle. So I hope you enjoyed that. And I will be back again tomorrow with another story. So you be really, really good. I love you loads and loads. And sleep tight. And so I love you, Atty. And I love you, Torby. And I love you, Ruby. And I love you, Max. So be good. I love you.